Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce's Ukraine War Frontline update for the 3rd of August 2023. Let's just dip into a few bits. I actually shared these with you in the news piece this morning, Malcontent News, saying that it's gone through Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics newspapers and media, just so you don't have to, and saying that the price of fuel and the availability of fuel in gas stations and petrol stations the price has skyrocketed, and you can't get hold of fuel, and that's because there are no local fuel depots left, or at least they've been severely hit, and this means that they're having to use just-in-time fuel supply in the area, the same as the military. So they're having to get that in by truck and then fill up gas stations and then leave, rather than filling up local depots and filling the gas stations from there. So this is having a real effect, and that is down to effect on everyday life, but you can imagine the effect on military logistics as well, and the ability for the Russians to fill up their own trucks with diesel or gas or whatever. And so this is showing the success of consistent Ukrainian hits on logistics. He says, reading the local news in the DNR informs me, 1, Ukrainian strikes on fuel depots are working. 2, Russian fuel supplies are fragile. 3, further disruption could impact Russian logistics. 4, the more you can make Russians dependent on trucks traveling longer distances, the better. So that is good news as far as what the Ukrainians are doing on that front. If we then go to Radu Hosu, talking about the front line as a whole here, he's a Romanian analyst. He talks about this area. So we're going to go to the northeast sector, that is Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna here. And he's going to talk about the Kupiansk front. There was talk. Andrew Perpetua was saying that there was some activity, possibly the Ukrainians pushing back or hemming in the Russians in this area north of Avdiivka, but not too much information coming out from there. Radu Hosu says, silence on the eastern front. The Russian counteroffensive is currently at a pause. We can only speculate that this pause is due to the lack of cohesion and coordination between the units reaching the point of culmination or shell hunger. So that's his kind of synopsis of that area as a whole. And then we are going to, just moving that for future. So the ISW, American military think tank, says geolocated footage posted on August 2nd shows that Russian forces made marginal advances south of Bilohorivka. We'll come down to that in a second. And that Russian Center Group of Forces spokesperson claimed that elements of the Russian Center Group of Forces captured 7 Ukrainian strongholds near Karmazianivka. So this is all we've heard really of the Karmazianivka area, which is here just to the west of Svatova or north. We have Kuzymivka and Novoselivka. There's a continued action there. It could be that the Russians are trying to, as I said, yes, they flank Kuzymivka and Novoselivka rather than going through Novoselivka. And then activity around this Karmazianivka area there. The claims from the Russians that they've taken a bunch of strongholds. That's not supported by any evidence that I've seen. There is... I think the Russians are being pressured and moving further back to the lines they started with. There is talk that they are amassing forces to mount a second offensive in that area, second counterattack there. We shall see. And then going further to the south, it talks about conducting unsuccessful attacks in that area on both sides. But it goes on to say Russian sources noted that Ukrainian forces continuous and unsuccessful attacks against Russian positions in the Serebyansky forest. So as we come further to the south, there's still activity going on all around here. Fierce fighting, I think, in the Serebyansky forest. But then there's talk about Bilohorivka here. Interesting that if we go to look at Andrew Perpetua's mapping, look at all of these represent a vehicle getting hit by an IED and either blown up or severely damaged. And there is just a huge plethora of activity, uptick in activity around, it seems, Verkhnokho-Mayanka. I don't know whether that is a sign of things to come, whether the Ukrainians are gearing up to do something, but it seems pretty significant to me that there is an awful lot of aerial activity there, and taking out a lot of targets in Verkhnokho-Mayanska that we just haven't seen over previous weeks. It does talk about, I don't know if that's here or further on, um, but here we have uh, the the Ukrainians hitting the Russians with thermobaric munitions, showing a marginal advance, as according to the ISW. Can't remember where that exactly is. Yeah, here, geolocated footage posted yesterday saying Russians have made marginal advances south of Bilohorivka. Let's plug that into Google Maps and see what comes up. And we can see that if the Ukrainians are hitting the Russians with thermobaric munitions in that location, then that supports what Suryat Maps has, but not what Andrew Perpetua's mapping suggests. So there could be an advance. It could well be an advance for the Russians in that Bilohorivka area. So yeah, that is something I'd agree with ISW's assessment there. We come on further to the south now, to Bakhmut, and we look at what's going on there. So yet again, it's mainly about the south in Bakhmut. Not a lot of information, well, no information about Bakhivka, Yehidne. They're supposed to be attacking towards Yehidne, but the Ukrainians kind of switched from going through Bakhivka to taking this more northeasterly route, but not really heard anything about that. Not really heard about any advances down the highway coming to the north of Bakhmut, or again around Rozdalivka. So it seems relatively quiet. There was talk, the Russians admitting it was a little bit quieter. There are still supposedly gains in the southern area. I don't think the Russians are in Klishchiivka at all. I mean, it's interesting that Suryat Maps, although I don't think they've mapped at all in the last 24 hours, still has this under the control of the Russians. That's not at all the case. It's at least fully contested or fully under the control of the Ukrainians. They seem to push the Russians further back towards this railway line. Radu Hosu says, allow Bakhmut to the north, the Ukrainians continue slow advance towards Soledar, so nothing particularly of interest there. South Klishchiivka has been abandoned by the Russians. The Ukrainians have reached a railway to the north of the town. The Ukrainians entered Kurdyamivka. I claim that special operations forces are in contact with the Russians in a forest south of Bakhmut in the Opitny area. If these are confirmed as the Azov South claim, then the Russians are in an extremely unfortunate position. So this is to go to the north of Klishchiivka, to that forest area possibly there. We know that the Ukrainians have been pushed back from there. The Russians have been pushed back from there and towards the railway line, but it could be that you've got an area here, this forest area there, where there could be special forces operating. And they're also talking about towards Opitny, so it could be some areas in between the railway line and Opitny. I wouldn't necessarily say there were many forested areas there, unless you can call that area. It could be. But I don't know. It looks more like agricultural land to me. So yeah, as we've kind of been seeing over the last few days, continuation of that in the Bakhmut area. He goes on to talk about actually the city itself, or the town itself. A loud explosion in the middle of Bakhmut, located somewhere east of the railway, was filmed by the Ukrainian military. Meanwhile, sources continue to claim that special forces, Ukrainians, are conducting raids inside the town. In Yehidny, the Ukrainians continue to attack Russian positions, and the Russians have little way to counterattack because the high positions are in the north are already liberated and under Ukrainian control. So that's claims there, but that's a fairly positive outlook. I think it is positive in Bakhmut, though. That must be said. Things are looking good for the Ukrainians, but I haven't seen too much granular detail yet. There's quite a bit of footage coming out, but I don't know that it shows anything of kind of territorial exchange. South of Bakhmut, the third separate assault brigade keeps moving. More and more sources confirm that Klishchiivka is indeed left by the Russians, and they are entrenched east of it. Fighting to clear the remaining dugouts west of the railway is ongoing. that the enemy, quote, made unsuccessful attempts to restore lost positions north and west of Klishivka as well as the northwest of Kurdyivka. So that's from the general staff. This is saying that the Russians are possibly desperately trying to fight back in the area because they realize that, you know, losing this trio of small settlements is a problem for them going forwards, and the Ukrainians will get to a stage where they are really threatening these uh, places like Kadima, which are really important, Vizela Dolina, and once they do that, then Bakhmut is operationally encircled. The ISW says that the Ukrainians have reportedly made advances in the area. They go on to say, suggesting that the element of the 5th Combined Arms Army, which is a Russian uh, element, which is predominantly operating in Western Donetsk Oblast, has partially deployed to the Bakhmut area, suggests that Russian forces may be rushing disparate elements to the area to hold the defense, unless the mill blogger simply misidentified the unit. So this is a claim that some troops are being used there that you wouldn't have expected to be used there. So it could be either a mistake or Russia are really throwing everything at defending Bakhmut, and that could be why the Ukrainians are finding it a little bit more slow going compared to, say, last week. Here we have location on a road from Klishivka to Bakhmut. So we have a first-person view drone attacking a Russian pickup, a Russian car as well. It just goes to show that they are hammering, the footage is there, hammering all sorts of logistics, troops getting to trucks. And the talk here is, in some areas of the front, the Russians get Ukrainian FPVs so much that they're afraid to go anywhere during the day. And it has footage showing that. Just trying to find, here it is, the location of that. So this will be behind Russian lines, but it just goes to show that, you know, FPV drones are operating everywhere. Yeah, so here between Opitny and I guess, well, just the southern area of the cemetery area of Bakhmut there. So the Russians are getting hit with first-person view drones. That is a common occurrence everywhere around the front line. Here, they're getting hit there. So I don't know how much it tells us, but as I said earlier in the news piece, and I'll say when we get down to Vuhledar, if you know, that means that if they're using first person drones here, it means that this is you kind of first line of defense, really. Yes, they would have the ability to use drones over here, but it means going over Russian troops and likelihood of them getting shot down to hit threats that aren't as threatening as the more immediate ones. So they're going to be hitting stuff that's closer to them, which means that the Ukrainians are going to be close to here for them to be using first person drones to hit Russian vehicles there. Anyway, that is Bakhmut. We'll carry on further to the south. And Avdiivka is a bit of a difficult one. There were, well, first of all, before we get to Avdiivka, there's this area by sort of Shumi, New York area here, where the Russians, according to Andrew Perpetua, made some gains, or unless it's a rejig. I haven't heard of any activity around here, but he's moved his mapping to show his map was in line with Syriac maps there, this big sort of rectangle of non-Russian control he now has as Russian control. I mean, that would make sense, but I don't know whether it reflects an attack from yesterday or the day before or whatnot, or just, as I say, rejigging. It looks like there is some difficulty for the Ukrainians north in this Vasily Kamyanka area, where the deep state map showed some gains for the Russians over the last 48 hours. Rather than showing gains for the Russians there, Andrew Perpetua has increased the grey zone in this area, so it could be some tough fighting. Then there are these differing claims about Opitny, Vodyane, and you know, who is making success where. Here we have, well, if we go back to the ISW that says of this area, let me just find it. So there are the normal claims about, you know, repelled activity all around Avdiivka from both sides, etc., etc. It just says geolocated footage published on the 1st shows that Russian forces advanced north of Vodyane. So Avdiivka is here. It's rather similar to Bakhmut, but kind of in reverse, where it's encircled um, three quarters. I mean, this is what Bakhmut was like, but obviously it's changed uh, with the Ukrainian counterattack. But here we have Avdiivka, three quarters encircled, and under pressure from all sides. But there were claims yesterday that while the Russians made some gains here, as according to one source, there were claims that Ukrainians made some gains around Opitny as well, and trying to work out exactly what's going on here. The claims that the Russians have made some advances, according to this Telegram footage, showing a Russian tank getting taken out here. So a Russian tank is in this position, and we'll plug that into Google Maps or Google Earth here, and find that Russian tank is not behaving, or at least Google Earth isn't behaving. Here it is. So yeah, that's okay. That shows an advance for Andrew Perpetua's lines, but behind the lines of Russian mapper Suryat maps. So that could be an advance in that area. Yeah, that would signify that. It's sometimes difficult when vehicles like a tank and some APCs maybe get blown up, because you don't know whether they're being destroyed in their own uh, controlled territory, or whether they are making an attack, in which case they're going into the grey zone and possibly even into the Ukrainian controlled zones, and then getting hit there. So when you see a single tank getting taken out there, it's difficult to know exactly what has taken place, but it would support Surat maps. Russian control being further forward than Andrew Perpetua in that particular area. So we move on further to the south, past Mariinka, where there is the usual claims of activity, Pobieda, Mariinka. Uh, Andrew Perpetua on his live stream said that Ukrainians might be pushing towards Solodka. Again, not sure. Now, there are some gains for the Ukrainians around the Mikilska Vuhledar area. So we see a big difference in the Suryat maps. They haven't made any changes there. Obviously, they haven't updated for the last 24 hours anyway, but they've been very charitable for the Russians in that area. It seems there are several sources saying that the armed forces of Ukraine have advanced in the Vuhledar area, and that is quite significant. There is support from that by, like I was talking earlier, about first-person view drones being used to hit equipment south of Vuhledar in the Mikilska area, and that would indicate that they are getting closer there. They are attacking towards there, because again, if the Russians were in this area there and the Ukrainians were back here, then they would be using first-person view drones in this area. But for them to be using them in the Mikilska area, you would assume that they have made advances forward, and I think that's pretty significant. So this is good news for the Ukrainians, because I think this gives the Russians something else to think about. We had heard that previously they'd been attacking around Pavlivka, but yeah, it would be great if this becomes. I think this is a good position for them to attack, because it's near Volnovaka down here, and actually they could get, like I've said before, they could get behind the Russian defensive lines, the kind of Surovikin lines that stretch across Donetsk and into Zaporizhia. They could get round a corner and behind them here, then that would give the Russians something to think about. It means they wouldn't attrit so many of their forces against those Russian defenses. But I don't know if that's, again, wishful thinking or not. But anyway, some Ukrainian success around Volodar, which is good news there. So then we come to the west towards Staromyolska, and there's no changes to the mapping there. If we go to Radu Hosu, says about the area, Velika Novosilka, Ka-52 attack helicopters attacking the position south of Staromyolnika, which has been confirmed by the Russians, would indicate that the Ukrainians have reached much further south than expected and officially announced. Why wouldn't the Ukrainians tell us that? Because plans love silence. So I'm not 100% sure about this. Don't have any confirmation from anywhere else. But the idea is that the Russian attack helicopters are potentially hitting targets around Staromilnivka, well, that would indicate that the Ukrainians are there, right? And much further to the south than indicated by the map here. There are claims that still fierce fighting over Urizhny, that Staromilsky there's is under pressure. The Ukrainians are under pressure from the heights to the west there. Andrew Perpetua is talking about how there's just a lack of information coming out of this area here, where it appears that the Russians are still in control. I guess they're still in control until we hear otherwise. Um, so this source says that Ukrainian troops repelled Russian counterattacks on the southern front, said the general staff. The enemy made unsuccessful attempts to restore the lost positions in the direction of Urizhny, Blagodatny, and western Staromayorsky. And then we have that being repeated by Euromaidan press, talking about the Russians trying to retake positions there. And a T-90 was hit by first-person drones, a first-person drone in Staromilnyivka. Again, it's the same point I've been making before, that if the Ukrainians are using first-person drones to hit positions here, then actually that's more likely where they're going to be attacking next, rather than I don't know. They could well be further south than has otherwise been indicated. ISW says the Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces unsuccessfully attempted to restore lost positions. Some Russian mill bloggers claim that Ukrainian forces hold the northern part of Staromilsky, while Russian forces control the heights and the fields south of Staromilsky and all of Urizhny. Again, that's not quite what I've heard. One Russian mill blogger claimed that most of Staromilsky remains contested, however. So the Russians still making claims that things are difficult around here, that they control more of the area than some Ukrainian sources have been claiming. Not too sure myself. There's lots of conflicting claims coming out, as you can well imagine, but ostensibly no map changes. We'll see, I guess, as the days go by, as to what's going on there and whether the Ukrainians are further to the south. That's what I would hope, but I don't want to believe things just based on wishful thinking. Now we come to the west, and not hearing too much about Marfapil, Drozhnyanka, anywhere there. There is that reminds me, actually, I haven't heard anything going back to Velika Novosilka of Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk. So these two areas that there were some rumors that they had been liberated by the Ukrainians. Just haven't heard anything in that area as of yet. Anyway, as we come further to the west, as I was saying, to Robotna and south of Orikhiv, we have a lot of activity going on around here. I mean, essentially, if you look at this map from Andrew Perpetua, it just gives you an indication that the Russians are really hammering the area to the north of Robotna with their air force. Orikhiv, Novodanilivka, Malotokmachka, under quite a lot of pressure from the Russians there. Other sources today saying National Guardsmen advance about 650 meters deep into the defense of the Russians, 1.5 kilometers along the front there, and establish themselves on a busy line in the Melitopol direction. There could be some gains in that Robotna sector for the Ukrainians, but I haven't seen that anywhere else yet. Defmon says the Russian positions are shelled east of Robotna, indicating a slight advance for the Ukrainian units, and he geolocates that to this position. And we plugged that in. No, yet again, didn't seem to work. Doesn't like me today. Here we go. So, yeah, that doesn't indicate to me any advances, any changes there. That's as Andrew Perpetua and Syriac maps agree. So maybe he's saying advances compared to ISW map or something else. But I'd say that's pretty much what I would expect. So we'll go to the ISW, Institute for the Study of War, talks about in the Melitopol direction, counteroffensive operations going on there. No confirmed advances or claimed advances by the Ukrainians there. Uh, as I say, this claim about 600 meters, 650 meters advanced is from only a couple of hours ago today, whereas the RSW is from last night. So there could well be advances for the Ukrainians in that area. I know it's particularly difficult there. The high ground east or west of Robotyne is controlled by the Russians there. So if you go to this kind of area, it's 93 meters. You can see, I don't know if you can see right at the bottom right-hand corner, gives you a height. So that's about where they got hammered attacking. They were sort of 85 meters, 88 meters. But they can be seen from here, which is 140 meters. So that's 60 meters difference. Actually, right across Robotyne, the Russians have the ability to hammer with ATGMs and whatnot. I mean, if you look at the distance there to where the Russians hammered, or to where the Ukrainians were, lost a lot of equipment. That's sort of 5.5 kilometers from here, so they can use ATGMs from the edge of there, from this high ground just here, which is 140 meters of height, and this is only sort of 80, 90 meters. They can also hit them from the other side and from the south as well. And so that's why arguably the Ukrainians took a pasting there and lost all that equipment a week ago. It might be wise. I mean, Andrew Perpetua was talking about this in his live stream, saying that really, taking the Ukraine, there are many ways to skin a cat, and they could really do with attacking the Russians from the western parts of Robotyne, from to the west of Robotyne, and then coming in behind them there. So that could be one option for the Ukrainians. They have been making slow and steady advances there, apparently, but I haven't got any granular information about what's going on there. To go back to the ISW, they say that the Russian forces repelled small Ukrainian attacks near Robotyne. Zaporizhia Oblast occupation official claimed that Russian forces repelled a Ukrainian advance of up to 10 personnel and a mine-clearing vehicle with armoured vehicle support near Robotyne, and a platoon-sized Ukrainian attack and one tank near Piatikhatki. So that is to say, to the west here, Piatikhatki, again, remaining under Ukrainian control, but Zerebianki still under Russian control. And the Ukrainians have failed to be able to break through in this small village there. There are a number of trenches around here. We know that there was a heavily booby-trapped trench that caused the Ukrainians to lose a lot of troops in this area. They may be reticent to storm those trenches without obliterating them with artillery first. But again, we have not too much information coming out of here. Is there an operational pause? Are they just going through the attritional phase still and waiting for the right moment to attack in proper? No real information coming from Dnipro River and Kherson. We have witnessed yet again another day of really big strikes on targets from Tokmak to Melitopol to Berdyansk to Primorsk to Mariupol and in between. So that is still taking place. It's significant. Crimea is still getting hammered as well by drones. And also, I just wanted to mention, I meant to mention it this morning in my news piece, that attack of 5 HIMARS on this island here is actually an isthmus on the sandbar that connects this piece of land to Kherson Oblast. There were claims that maybe 200 Russians perished in that, or casualties. I said, it's pretty significant, maybe 100 or so. There are claims that as many as 200 were affected. That was a really significant strike in 5 different places of equipment and personnel along that spit. And apparently, according to reporting from Ukraine, what the Russians were doing was every day coming out to do exercises in the same place. I don't know whether it's fitness, whether drills or whatever, but there were places where the Ukrainian drones witnessed them doing repeated activity and then just plugged in the coordinates to HIMARS and hit them at 5 places pretty much simultaneously. And that caused them quite a lot of issue to say the least. Anyway, I just wanted to put a bit more meat on the bones to that event. But yeah, so not a great deal of detail coming out from a lot of these places, but I'll keep you updated as and when I can. As far as Frontline update, I might have time to do one tomorrow. I might not. And we'll see as I go forward. I am taking my laptop on holiday and this headset, so I will be able to do some videos. I just don't know quite what I'll have time to do and how I will organize it all. Nonetheless, I will speak to you soon in the extra video to come out later today.